Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, folks, Big Paul here with another Anabolic Q&A. We've got some good stuff on deck today. There's a question about HGH timing and whether you should take it multiple times a day or in a single dose. I have a client that said that he heard from other top bodybuilding coaches in the Olympia. A guy that's an Olympia level coach was recommending multiple times a day, and we're going to talk about that, why that might be. We have another question about best peptides outside of growth hormone and issues with Slin causing hiccups on prep. And we have other questions. These are all from members of my school, community, site, team, Anabolic Bodybuilding. If you want to become a member of the site, it's a great place to communicate with other people that are my clients and also just followers. You get access to exclusive videos that I have up for members. There's some stuff on PED profiles, how to build cycles, things like that. Also a forum, and you get first dibs on questions for the Q&As. It's only $30 a month. It's super cheap. It's a good value. And you get access to ask me questions too. You can put your questions up on the forum. I answer questions and post articles up there for people to read and review about PEDs, training, nutrition, and bodybuilding in general. And enough of that stuff, folks. We are going to get started with the Q&A in just 1 second. All right, before I get started, I'm going to ask if you could please subscribe to my channel and like this video. I got a lot of people watching, not that many people subscribing, and it seems that YouTube has shadow banned me. At least that's the best I can tell. It's not showing my channel to anybody really outside of my subscribers, so I would appreciate it if you subscribed if you're a new viewer and you've stumbled upon my videos somehow. All right, first question I got here is from Matthew Bolduck. I think I said his name correctly. I apologize, Matthew, if I screwed that up. Matthew is a subscriber to the Team Anabolic Bodybuilding members site. He goes, do you ever go through long periods where there isn't a lot of strength gain, but drastic size gain? Yes, absolutely. And this is what I see as you progress through bodybuilding. It seems like strength gains, at least in my experience, come before size gains. I have always noticed, I have no science, nothing to back this up with, zero. This is just what I have seen. I'll have these breakthroughs in strength where my strength rockets up, plateaus, and I don't get any stronger, but then I start growing, adding size afterwards. And then sometimes I'll just, continue to get bigger and not really get that much stronger. Honestly, I would say that I'm weaker than I was in my 20s, but I am much bigger, denser, fuller than I was. And so I've talked about this before, that strength is relative, really. It's about mechanical tension when you're growing. And that mechanical tension that we're placing on the muscle to elicit hypertrophy also has a lot to do with your technique on how you lift. And the technique for bodybuilding and powerlifting is very different. For powerlifting, we want to get the weight from point A to point B in the most efficient fashion possible. For bodybuilding, we're trying to place the most mechanical tension possible on the muscle. We want to take that off the joints, get it on the muscle, whereas it's the exact opposite in powerlifting. We're just trying to leverage it, use the best technique possible to get weights from point A to point B as efficient as possible. And that's why I don't get super wrapped up in PRs anymore. I used to be a beat the logbook kind of guy, which is awesome. I think if you're a young lifter, having the logbook, getting in the gym, doing it JP style, Dorian Yates style, Dante Trudell's DC training, that's fantastic when you're young and you're progressing strength, but at some point you sort of just hit the wall. And there's only so far you can progress it. How far are you going to take dumbbell curls? And sometimes What I found after years of training, that you get so obsessed with beating the logbook that really you just get better at cheating and leveraging the weight up. Your mission in the gym becomes to get stronger, which is not always necessarily the goal in bodybuilding. It's relative. And with that said, like I said, I always see strength gains come first. It seems to come in spurts for me. It's not a linear thing. I get guys that get very frustrated with their training when they don't see strength increases for months on end. And a lot of times it has to do with food intake too. You will notice when you go on contest prep, you're eating less carbs, strength goes down when you're eating in a calorie deficit. As soon as you come out of contest prep or a dieting phase, you add carbohydrates back in, you put gas back in the gas tank, instantly your strength rockets back up. So some of that is related to food as well, and the type of PEDs that you're taking. I do think there's also some fatigue that accumulates with the PEDs as well. As you're taking more PEDs, more growth hormone, more insulin, things like that, eating more food, after a while you get lethargic, performance in the gym isn't as great, but you are still growing. So yes, it does seem to not line up exactly with each other. It's weird how that works. It doesn't seem like that you get stronger at the same time you're getting bigger. They just kind of seesaw back and forth with each other. All right, next question I have here is from David Radolovich. I think I said your name correctly, David. I apologize if I didn't. David is a member of the Team Anabolic Bodybuilding School site. David asked, a top 3 Olympia coach is dividing 6 units of GH into 3 to 4 portions before bed, first thing in the morning, and after the workout with protein and carb meals. Sometimes he adds 2 units to the largest meal. No insulin added. What can be the reason that after the workout with a large meal? I honestly have no clue why he would do that. I think sometimes people overcomplicate things and overthink things. There may be some logic that I'm missing here. I could get it with insulin. So here's the thing with GH. There has been a lot of overcomplication with GH administration, guys taking it multiple times a day. I've done it before. I played around with it. And there are pluses and minuses to taking GH multiple times a day. You're going to have a more sustained level of growth hormone throughout the day. GH, when subcutaneously administered, has a half-life of something like 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours. Peak plasma levels happen about 4 hours. Peak plasma levels happen around 6 hours. The GH gets distributed throughout the body. It triggers the JAK-STAT signaling pathway, leading to protein synthesis, lipolysis, and IGF-1 production. Now, IGF-1 production lasts longer. IGF-1 production lasts as long as 24 hours. Really, then that's what we're looking for when we are growing. So my thought process is the frequent administration of GH doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're in an off season and you're eating carbs. There's a couple of reasons for it. One, you're going to have a high IGF-1 level throughout the day. Anyway, you may even get a higher IGF-1 spike taking it in a single large bolus dose at night. The body makes GH in a pulsatile nature, typically at night. And there's also the insulin sensitivity and rising glucose levels that concern me. And I have seen this with myself. I'm a type 1B diabetic, and I've seen it with my clients. When you break it up into multiple doses throughout the day while you're eating carbohydrates, blood sugars tend to rise. They get higher, and you're going to need something like some insulin or something to counteract some of that. The more insulin you take, the more GH you take, the more insulin resistance is going to stack up, and it's just this cascade of problems. Whereas if you take it at night, when you're in a fasted state, when it hits peak plasma levels, it's going to be somewhere, like let's say if you took it at 11 o'clock at night and you slept till 7 a.m., you're going to hit peak plasma levels around 4 or 5 a.m. while you're asleep and in a fasted state, in a low carbohydrate state, and it shouldn't affect your blood sugars as negatively. If you're taking it throughout the day while you're eating carbohydrates, in theory, it could potentially cause a rise in blood glucose levels. Now, If you're healthy, metabolically healthy, I haven't seen that be as big of a problem. If you're also insulin sensitive, that's not as big of a problem. But as you're pushing food higher, that can be an issue. I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. It's a lot of extra work for really no extra benefit. Maybe on contest prep, you could make an argument if you're eating no carbohydrates or low carbohydrates, you could use it for the lipotic effect with the GH to have more sustained levels throughout the day. But even still, like these guys that are taking it in the morning before they do their cardio, it's not even going to be peaked for 6 hours, peak plasma levels for 6 hours. So you would have to get up at 1 a.m. if you're doing 8 a.m. or 1 a.m. if you're going to do 7 a.m. fasted cardio. So that makes no sense. So the whole taking it in the morning before your fasted cardio really doesn't do anything. I used to do that, and the more I thought about it, this is something I've changed my mind on. I think you're creating a lot of extra work for just not much additional benefit. Long story short, just take a large bolus at night. Maybe on contest prep, you could make an argument for splitting it up into multiple doses, but I would just take the whole injection before bed, subcutaneously, like the drug was designed to be used. It's literally what it says in the insert packet of the Serostim. That's how it's used. And the guys that are splitting it up into multiple doses throughout the day, I really haven't seen it make much of a difference. I've tried it. I couldn't tell any difference either way, whether I was taking multiple doses or at night. The only thing I really saw different is it made my glucose levels get higher during the day. It also made me tired during the day. And to me, it just wasn't worth being tired during the day, lethargic. It wasn't worth the increase in blood glucose levels where I had to use insulin to counteract that. More insulin because I am already a diabetic. To me, it just makes more sense. Take it in a fasted state at night the majority of the year. That's simple, easy, not a lot of thought you have to put into it. Keeps things nice and clean. And you're going to probably have better blood sugar levels as a result. Joshua Cohen asks, what are your favorite peptides outside of GH? Are most of them overhyped? TB500, BPC 157 applications and scenarios where they would be useful. I haven't really gone deep down the peptide rabbit hole. I am kind of just a do the basics kind of guy. I mean, insulin's a peptide, technically. GH is a peptide. I have been messing around with retatrutide, also a peptide. I find it to be very effective. In my honest opinion, maybe I'm alone on this one, I never found that BPC 157 and TB500 did much of anything. I can't tell any difference when I'm on it and when I'm not. Now, maybe that's because, like with me, my shoulders all beat the fuck up. And I got a torn labrum. There's, arthritis in there. It probably isn't going to help that. I do think it does seem to help with injury recovery and speed of injury recovery. When I had my ACL surgery, I did use some peptides. I used BPC 157, TB500, also some growth hormone and Anavar to help with my recovery. And I was able to get fully recovered from my ACL tear in something like 6 to 7 months. I cut a couple months off the recovery time. And I've seen it with people that I've talked to that are recovering from orthopedic surgeries where they have been able to rapidly get back to 100% faster than what a normal person would without them. Some other peptides, and guys are all the time asking me about the growth hormone secretagogues, Semirelin, and some of these other ones. Honestly, just save your money and buy growth hormone. Generic growth hormone now is so cheap that it's really, sometimes it's more expensive to take the secretagogues, the growth hormone secreting peptides, than it is to actually just take growth hormone itself. And they don't really make that much of a difference. I'm throwing arbitrary numbers out here, so don't quote me on this, but like if something like a 30% or a 40% increase in your natural GH production is what you would get out of a GH secretagogue, that sounds fantastic. But if your body is only making 1 unit of GH or equivalent per day, that is a 40% increase would take you up to 1.4 units. You're not even going to notice that. It's not going to be that big of a difference. And as you get older, your Your pituitary is not as efficient as it was when you were younger, so you're probably making even less growth hormone. So just cut out the middleman and take some growth hormone. I really have not found many of the other peptides to be, that effective. The GLP-1s are fantastic. They do work. They are great. That's why the pharmaceutical companies are fighting with the compound pharmacies right now to get a wrangle on that, because there's a $1 billion industry to be had. They aren't fighting over BPC 157 and TB 500. They aren't fighting over the HGH secretagogues because they just don't work that well. Some peptides work great. Some peptides don't work so great. I do know melanotan. A lot of guys love melanotan. I have stayed away from it because I've had melanoma twice, and it does concern me with how it affects the melanocyte. In theory, it should protect you from UV damage, which leads to melanoma, but I do not want to mess around with anything that might affect the melanocyte and increase chances of having additional skin cancer. So honestly, people are always looking for the next best thing. Just stick with the basic shit. Really, HGH, testosterone, a little bit of Primo or Masteron, whatever you prefer. If you want to sprinkle in some stuff, like, it's not going to hurt to take BPC 157 and TB 500. If you have soft tissue injury, it might help. I don't find that it does a whole lot. It might lower inflammation a bit. But other than that, I need to do some more deep dives into the peptides. I really just have not messed around with that many of them. I feel like a lot of them don't have a lot of benefit for the cost. I could be completely wrong about that. I know some people love peptides, and I'm very open-minded and like to try things, but I just stick with the basics. I do run some BPC 157 and TB 500 now and then to help with inflammation and joint pain and things like that. It does seem to help a bit. And really that's, right now I'm running retatrutide. So those are the things that I mainly run as far as peptides go. All right, next question is from a YouTube user. He left a comment on the last video. If you guys have questions, you can leave them in the comments section below. I'll select a couple of the good questions from the YouTube comments for the next Q&A the following week. This one is from Adrian Garcia. He asked, do you know anything or have heard of anything about Clen causing chronic hiccups? Every time I take Clen, about 2 weeks in, I start getting chronic hiccups lasting 3 to 4 days, and I need medication to stop them. Any reason that you know of? There are multiple reasons. It seems like the hiccups are a big issue on contest prep, when toxicity is high, when CNS stimulation is high. We're taking a bunch of stimulants. These stimulants can affect the central nervous system. Hiccups a lot of times are related to overstimulation of the central nervous system. Clenbuterol can cause muscle tremors, as you've seen. Guys will get shaky on it, including in places that are not ideal, like the diaphragm, which could lead to involuntary contractions and cause hiccups. People get muscle cramps on them. Increase sympathetic nervous system activity. Clenbuterol stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which can lead to abnormal phrenic nerve and vagus nerve activity, both which are involved in hiccup reflex control. Tren is also another offender of causing the vagus nerve stimulation, which can increase hiccups. I've seen guys get chronic hiccups when running higher doses of Tren before, or using a bunch of fat burners on contest prep. Hiccups can also be a sign of liver stress. Liver stress can also cause hiccups. That could be an issue as well. Electrolyte imbalances. Clenbuterol causes potassium depletion. In my experience, most people do not take in enough potassium. Just a word of disclosure for all the bros that love to take ARBs, specifically telmisartan. Telmisartan can cause retention of potassium, so you do have to be careful with potassium intake while taking an ARB. But electrolyte disturbances such as potassium deficiency can cause diaphragm spasms, muscle cramps. That could also be a contributing factor. And as a bronchodilator, clenbuterol affects the airway and smooth muscles in the respiratory control, possibly leading to hiccups, and if it alters natural breathing, once again, how it affects the diaphragm. So these are just some things to consider with clenbuterol. I would say if it's causing you hiccups, just back off the dose. And now there are other non-stimulant options for fat burning. Vigor Steve and Dr. Dean had some really great information up on their metabolic stack, increasing, using things like retatrutide, SLU. There's MOTS-C, there's some other things that these guys were using, methylene blue, to increase mitochondrial function rather than using stimulants, beta agonists, things like that, to burn fat. I do like clenbuterol. It's my favorite fat burner. I think it's probably the most effective one, at least for me it is. It gets me hardened up quickly. But there are other options. You don't have to use clenbuterol. So if it's causing you a lot of problems, I've seen guys that just will have chronic hiccups 24/7. It's probably the combination of clenbuterol with tren. Most people do the clen and tren combo, and you're going to have a lot of CNS stimulation, increased sympathetic nervous system activity that's going to cause problems, and that's likely the root cause of it. It's probably not liver issues, but it could be if you're taking orals on top of it as well. You've got the trifecta of issues that could lead to chronic hiccups. Anyway, that's my long-winded explanation. Hopefully that helps you, and try some different stuff and see how it goes. Lightweight baby 40 ask, getting gyno surgery late this summer this year. It's pretty small on one side and very small on the other. Should I let it run wild and grow a bit before I get the surgery to ensure removal of the gland is successful? I think that's what Steve did. Vigorous Steve, he just had gyno surgery. And I've had gyno surgery not once, but twice on both sides. And I had it a third time on my left side, and I need to get it cleaned up again on my right side. I am hypersensitive to things like D-ball and stuff like that are going to cause increased gynecomastia. So I would say yes. Let that shit run wild. This is not my medical advice. I'm not telling you what to do, but I have heard of guys that will do the old DECA and D-ball combo to get that gyno growing massively. If you want to grow boobies, DECA and D-ball is the way to go. If you're prone to gyno, DECA will make you grow boobies like nothing else. Same thing with D-ball. So the DECA and D-ball combination will make you grow boobies. I would also say make sure you are connected up with a competent plastic surgeon. You want a board certified plastic surgeon that's actually worked on bodybuilders before. There are different techniques now. It used to be that they would leave leave a piece of the gland in there, but my experience that it grows back. They would do that to keep the nipple from collapsing. I had my nipple collapse on my left side after the last surgery. That's why I have a funky looking nipple. And then I have on my right side, I have a little piece of gyno that's still there, so they do not look, they don't match each other. But now they can do things like the surgeon I went to put a piece of mesh behind it to help get it. But I would make sure that they get the majority of the gland out, because even if there is a little piece back there, it can still grow back. But I would talk to a competent surgeon, make sure that they have worked on bodybuilders before, because there's a lot of these guys that have never worked on anybody like us. They just worked on fat dudes. You want to make sure you don't have any large scars. There is also, you need to make sure that some guys will just go in and remove the gland and not do liposuction. Liposuction is also necessary to make sure that things look correct. They go in through the nipple and do it correctly. Sometimes that gland sits up under the chest. They need to make sure that they get up in there deep to get all of it out. I had pieces when I had my last surgery done that were all the way up by my armpit. Guy was reaching up there deep and yanking out pieces. I was awake for it. Some surgeons will let you stay awake for it. Some will knock you out. It is cheaper if you stay awake for it, but it is, I don't know, it's kind of unpleasant. But I wanted to be awake. I kind of like seeing the stuff. He was like showing me the pieces that came out. It's a friend of mine. It's a plastic surgeon. But anyway, Yes, that is a strategy. I'm not saying it's a strategy you should employ, but if there's more there, there's more to take out, and it may be easier for the surgeon, but I would ask your surgeon about that first. And, I have heard of guys doing it that way. That is an option. I'm not saying it's the right option, but it is an option. Last question here is from Jeff Portnoy from YouTube. I'm always hesitant answering insulin questions because most bros are too dumb to do insulin. They can't do math, and you have to do math when you take insulin, or you could die. I take insulin every day because I'm a diabetic. And I also have a degree in data analytics, so I know how to do math. But even still, sometimes I go hypo. Anyway, on to Jeff's question. If too high of a dose of insulin can send you hypo, is there a risk with too low of a dose? Won't the excess needed to process the carbs just be covered by my pancreas? So it will still be beneficial to the body in some way to take some strain off the pancreas. I am going to do 4 to 6 units of GH. Do I need to know the exact amount of carbs I will eat that day, the precise amount of insulin to cover it? Yes, this is what I'm talking about. You have to know math to be able to take insulin. Now, with Lantus is a basal insulin. There's other basal insulins. Lantus is a basal insulin. It's going to cover your background insulin throughout the day. It is less likely to make you go hypo. It's harder to screw up, but they do have a dosing calculator on their website. It's based on body weight. Your medium and rapid acting insulins, you're going to need to calculate out based off of how many carbs you eat. And yes, you can take less. And in theory, your pancreas should make up the difference. Even still, sometimes guys will go hypo. I have seen that happen before. And I can tell you from my own experience from being diabetic, if I take 5 units today and I'm just fine, and I take 3 units tomorrow with a meal, I might go hypo. It's different from day to day. And you have to be diligent with tracking your blood glucose levels and seeing how you respond to it. So before I take it, I check my glucose levels pre-meal and then again 2 hours post-meal to see how my body reacts to it. If you have the money to burn, I would probably just get a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, so you can keep more accurate readings on where your glucose levels are so you can see how you respond to the insulin. But there is an appropriate dose for the amount of carbs that you take in. You don't want to take in more and end up in a problem. So you have to be cautious. You have to be smart about it. And there is a theory, and I've seen it, people talk about it. I don't know how much value there is to it, that taking insulin as a bodybuilder can take stress off your pancreas and reduce load on your pancreas and prevent pancreatic burnout. I have type 1B diabetes where I have pancreatic insufficiency. I have seen pancreatic insufficiency in other bodybuilders. It is possible that of years of, making temporary insulin resistance from GH and your body's cranking out insulin in overtime, that you may have created an environment where you have some sort of beta cell burnout. But typically a type 1 diabetic is autoimmune. Type 1B, they're not really sure. It could be genetic. And then you'll see it in type 2 diabetics that are insulin resistant after years of being insulin resistant and their pancreas working overtime. After a while, it just gives up the ghost. Now, here's the problem. When you take more insulin to deal with the GH, it's this cascading spiral that you get into where you are potentially creating more insulin resistance and you need more insulin to keep up with the carbohydrate intake and the GH, and you just get in this spiral where you just progressively become more and more diabetic. You can actually make yourself diabetic from taking insulin if you're not careful. I would also be careful with the GH. As I mentioned earlier in the earlier question, I probably would take it before bed. Keep it away from your meals with high carbohydrates in it. That would probably be a smarter approach. Now, if you wanted to take it with meals with carbohydrates, guys, bodybuilders are using insulin to counteract that. But I would say this is my advice usually I give to people about insulin. I know bros want to dabble and experiment, but if you're just a gym bro, you have no intention of competing at a high level, I would probably just leave the insulin alone. You're not really going to get a lot of benefit out of it. Most dudes are not detailed enough with tracking the carbohydrates, with checking their glucose levels to justify taking the insulin. You have to really be on point and on top of that if you are going to take insulin. Otherwise, you're just taking risk. You're putting yourself at danger of going hypo, even on a small dose. Like guys think, well, if I'm supposed to have 10 units with this meal, if I take 3, I'm going to be okay. I've seen guys go hypo. I have. Your body responds differently, and your glucose levels are constantly fluctuating, so you can't accurately predict what it's going to be from day to day. You have to adjust your dose based on what your glucose levels are and your carbohydrate intakes, and that fluctuates. So you have to be really on top of things. You really have to be good with your math. There's very little margin for error. You have to be smart with it. And I would say just for most people, 1, they're not going to do that. And 2, it's just not worth the risk just to be a gym bro bodybuilder. You're going to get 98% of the results that you want to get just from your anabolics alone. So I would probably just leave the insulin alone unless you're having an intention of being a pro bodybuilder or a high-level competitor, or maybe if you're already experiencing some sort of diabetes, but then you just work with your doctor to treat that and come up with an effective dosing protocol. All right, folks, that's all I got for you on this one. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for your support. It means a lot to me. I will see you on the next episode. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.